Welcome and thank you for joining me today. I'm artist Lauren MacLeod of Mermaid Trash, and today I'm going to show you how I use layers to create my epoxy resin oceans. For this project, I'm using Total Boat tabletop resin, Mermaid Trash pigments, and a bit of Mod Podge and real sand from my local Florida beach. So to start with, I'm using a birchwood panel. It's 20 by 24. I love adding textures to my resin ocean pieces, so I start by adding quite a bit of Mod Podge to the bottom of my board, and then I like to sprinkle the sand on top of it. And by creating these thick lines with the brushes, the sand will adhere to the thicker spots and less to the thinner spots and kind of create some natural depth. I seal it off with a bit of matte acrylic spray, and you can leave the sand color the way it is or use a bit of watered down acrylic paint to paint in a little bit of color. I like to also paint the rest of my birchwood boards with the colors that are going to match my epoxy. And for this video, I'm going to skip over the first layer of resin because I'm just going to assume that you know how to do a one-layered ocean piece and you're more interested in learning layers. So in between layers, I typically wait until it's cured to the touch, which is 24 hours for this particular resin. And the reason why I do that is so if I accidentally drip on the previous layer, that I can just wipe it away with a little bit of alcohol and it's not going to ruin the finish. The first thing that I do is calculate the amount of resin that I need on the board for just the particular area where I want that layer to go. Once I have that figured out, I generally round up by an ounce or two, depending on how big the project is. And that's just to make sure that I have enough resin on hand. One mistake that I see artists make is they don't put enough resin on their board, and if there isn't enough, then you're just not going to be able to blow back that white and get the movement that you need to create cells. So now that I've got all the epoxy laid out on my board from darkest to clear, I like to lay a really nice thick bold stripe of my Mermaid Trash foam white on top of the clear pigment. And I heat it up just a little bit with my butane torch before I start blowing it back. And as I do start blowing it back with my heat gun, I definitely like to keep the heat gun at an angle, and you'll see my piece, the birchwood panel, kind of rocking back and forth throughout the whole video. And that is me tilting the board away from me as I'm working on it. And that really helps, stretch out that white and pull it back, and helps create, movement in the cells as I work. Especially with these larger pieces, it can definitely be difficult to get the white to blow all the way back over the back of the piece when there's just so much resin in between the wave break in the back of the piece. So one of the key things I find important, especially with these bigger pieces, is having that tapered nozzle on my heat gun. It really provides direction for the heat gun air, so that you see those little ripples as I'm blowing it back, and that's just from how strong the airflow is. And again, especially with these bigger pieces, I find that that's an important tool to have. For this last layer, I'm basically going to repeat the steps that I did in the first two. The only difference is that I like to make this last layer a little less opaque than the rest. And this just helps add dimension to the piece by being able to see through this last layer a little bit. And again, I'm just making sure that I have enough resin to go on the board for this last layer. when working from front to back like this, instead of laying the colors from the back of the canvas to the front, you just want to be careful that your resin doesn't start running towards the front of your board. And I do this by tilting the piece backwards. I also like to pour that clear in the front about an inch away from where I actually want it. As you see me heat it with the torch here, even just doing that is going to cause the resin to heat and expand some. And I always tend to tilt the board as I'm heating the white. It just helps it from running forward. As I begin to blow this out on this last layer, I'm going to kind of let it run. I only have it sped up by 1/2, so it's basically in real time. It's only sped up a little bit, just so that you could see how long it does take to blow these resin waves back all the way. And I'm making sure that my resin is pigmented enough, and I'm also making sure that I put enough white on the canvas to be able to blow it back like this. I find a common mistake that people make is two things. They either don't pigment their resin enough, and as they start to blow their waves out, it just becomes wispy, and it doesn't really have the chance to sell because there's just not enough pigment in the resin mixture for it to find other pigment molecules on your canvas to bond to and create cells. I don't know if that was too sciencey, but basically you need to have enough resin pigment on your canvas to be able to bond to each other. And as you heat it, that is what creates the cells. The second mistake I see a lot of people make is, even if they do have enough pigment in their resin, they don't pour enough onto the canvas. So again, as they start to blow it out, it may look really bold and white at the front of the wave, but there's just not enough white pigment there to blow back and kind of blend it into the back of your canvas, or even blow it off the back of your canvas. So what I see is people typically ending up with like what looks like just like a white strip, a white line, and it doesn't really foam out, and there's no real waves. It just kind of looks like a line, and that's because there's probably enough pigment in the mixture. They just didn't add enough to the project, or there wasn't enough resin on the board to begin with in order for it to be able to be blown back like that. And using the torch at the end just kind of helps encourage and bring out the cells. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here for you. The project's been sitting for about 15 minutes now. And an important one last tip to leave you with is to make sure that you don't overwork your piece with heat. A lot of people, I think, make the mistake of overworking it because they don't see the results that they're looking for immediately. And just know that sometimes cells can take like 10-15 minutes to form. So I hope that you found this video useful, and if you have any questions or comments, just leave it below and I'll try to answer them. And thank you so much. Please like and subscribe to the Mermaid Trash YouTube page.